Pop didn't change because of louder solos. It changed because of smarter guitars. 5 names you rarely hear, 5 parts you know by heart. These are the underrated hands that rewired radio and changed pop forever. I didn't recognize the song at first. I recognized the feel. I was a floor manager at a New York club in '83, watching a room that pretended not to care suddenly move as one. The bass hadn't even entered yet. It was the guitar, that bright, percussive chuck-chuck, like a metronome with swagger. I looked up at the booth, and the DJ just grinned. Bowie, Nile Rodgers.
What color lights up your face?
You don't forget the first time you hear Nile's right hand. It's not about solos, it's about space. He slices time into thin, danceable pieces and leaves room for everything else to breathe. Kick, snare, voice, horns. Years earlier, I'd felt the same pulse in Le Freak and Good Times. You feel it in your knees before your brain names it. By the time Let's Dance hit its first chorus, the room was a mirror ball, strangers smiling like they shared a secret. The secret was the guitar. Later, I read how Bowie told Nile, "Make it a hit." And Nile did what he always does. He found the pocket that lets a pop song move. It's patient, it's clean, it's confident. Madonna's like a virgin, Duran Duran's notorious. That DNA is everywhere. People call it disco, funk, post-disco, pop. I call it permission. Permission for the guitar to lead without grandstanding. When I lock eyes with the bartender during that second chorus, we both nod. Nobody in the room is analyzing voicings or production. They're just dancing. That's Nile's gift. He turns theory into feeling. On a great night, it feels like he's playing your heartbeat from the stage, and the rest of the band is following him.
Roll away, sitting on the dock.
I was the new kid sweeping the hallway at Stax. Sawdust on the floor, cigarette smoke in the air, the studio humming like a Sunday engine. Steve Cropper walked past me carrying nothing but calm. His guitar tone didn't shout, it underlined.
Yes, I'll remain the same, sitting here resting.
The talk around the building was that Otis had been working on a different kind of song. Sad, still, ocean-wide. When I heard the playback of Dock of the Bay, what struck me wasn't a flashy lick. It was the shape of the chords. Clean, thoughtful, the kind of guitar that doesn't get in the way of a voice because it knows the voice is the point.
Look like nothing's gonna change.
Cropper co-wrote it with Otis, same way he helped craft Knock on Wood and In the Midnight Hour. That's his quiet superpower. He doesn't just play parts, he designs rooms for singers to live in.
I'm just a wasting time.
On the studio floor, he'd cut off a ringing chord with a gentle palm mute and let silence do the speaking. He'd add a tiny fill, like a nod between friends. I learned more watching his left hand than from any book. Keep it simple, keep it true. Pop isn't only about what you add, it's what you leave out. Cropper made restraint sound like courage.
Sitting on the dock of a bay.
Years later, I hear Dock of the Bay in a grocery store, and it still stops me cold. You can hear water, sky, and distance in those chords. It's pop that's not trying to be pop. It's pop because it feels human. Steve Cropper taught me the guitar can be a good listener, and that's why the world keeps listening back. The first time I heard that riff, I thought it was a trick. One clip pattern, barely any notes, and yet it felt like someone had tightened a wire around the dance floor. I was assisting on a radio promo that day when the rep said, "Quincy's new single." The needle dropped. Tick, tack, tock, click. Then the drums. Then that guitar. The room leaned forward like we'd smelled rain in dry season. David Williams wasn't the face on the poster, but his guitar was the spine of Billie Jean. No big solo, no fireworks. just discipline. He sat right on top of the groove, precise muting, tight right hand, a pulse that made the kick drum feel like it had a partner. I later learned Williams shows up all over Michael's records, a kind of stealth architect.
And mother always told me, be careful who you love, be careful what you do.
The lesson was simple and hard. Restraint is a craft, and when it's perfect, it sounds inevitable. Watching crowds years later, I'd see it happen the same way. That riff starts and conversations shut down mid-sentence. Shoulders rise and fall in time. An entire club agrees, without talking, to move together. Williams made the guitar a metronome with personality, the clock that keeps the whole pop machine alive. I've met players who can shred across the fretboard. That's impressive. But the ones who can sit in a 2-bar loop for 5 minutes without losing energy? That's rare. That's pop mastery. David Williams taught me that groove is a promise the guitar makes, and then keeps. I was a nervous kid in a Manchester record shop when the needle touched the 7-inch. The room filled with chime, like someone had strung bells across a rain gutter and made them sing. No power chords, no distortion wall, just movement, arpeggios wrapping around each other, bright and alive. I didn't know the theory. I just knew I wanted the world to sound like that. Johnny Marr made indie feel elegant. Alternate tunings, open strings that rang like light through a stained glass window, parts that danced with the bass line instead of crushing it. It wasn't rock against pop. It was guitar as pop, hooks inside the harmony. He made space for a singer to be odd and tender and loud, all at once, because the guitar was already carrying the emotion forward. Walking home with the single in my jacket, I rehearsed the riff on my thigh, trying to keep the right hand even and the left hand clean. When I finally learned it, I realized the trick. It's not hard for the sake of hard, it's musical for the sake of feeling. That approach spilled into the 90s and beyond. Britpop, alt-pop, jangly radio that didn't apologize for melody. Years later, when I hear those first seconds of This Charming Man, I still get the same feeling I had in that shop. The sense that guitar can be conversation, not argument. That's Marr's gift to pop. He made the instrument talk in complete, beautiful sentences. I was working the late shift at a small town station when the program director said, "New Police single, quiet, but it hits." He wasn't wrong. The first thing you hear is guitar like glass, a steady chorus-kissed pattern that sounds simple until you try to play it. The voicings don't shout, they hover, and every time the chord resolves, it feels like your heartbeat exhaling. Andy Summers did something radical by sounding calm. He brought jazz voicings and a hint of reggae sway into a clean pop arpeggio, and he did it with the confidence of a player who understands the negative space around the notes. In a decade of big drums and bigger hair, he found a line so spare, so balanced, it became one of the most recognizable guitar parts in history. I remember taking the record home and trying to capture that feel. The trick wasn't pedals, it was patience. Summers holds the line like he's watching the tide. Same pattern, new meaning each time it returns. That's why it works on radio at 3 a.m. and in a wedding hall at 3 p.m. It's universal, not because it's easy, but because it's human, steady, insistent, quietly emotional. When listeners called the station to ask, "What's that song with the hypnotic guitar?" I'd smile. Pop has many ways to be loud. Summers showed it can be loud by being soft, by playing the part that everyone hums even when they don't realize they're humming it.
Hey, Pop Lore family. Did you know only 1% of viewers are subscribed? If you love deep dives into pop legends, forgotten gems, and the stories behind the songs that shaped generations, hit that subscribe button right now. And don't forget to turn on LL notifications so you'll be the first to know when we premiere our next video. It's free, it helps pop lore grow, and it makes sure you never miss a single countdown or music story. Let's build this community together.
The first time I heard Apache, it didn't sound like a pop song. It sounded like space. I was a teenager in post-war Britain, crouched over a cheap transistor radio when that twanging Stratocaster cut through the static. The Shadows weren't singing, but they didn't need to. Hank Marvin's guitar was doing all the talking. Smooth, echo-soaked, confident. Until then, guitars were rhythm tools, something that held up the song behind a singer. But Marvin made the instrument the voice. His phrasing was clean but emotional, every bend and slide like a word being spoken. For a generation of British kids, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, it was a revelation. They heard what I heard, the future. Apache felt cinematic. It had mood and melody, like a Western movie condensed into 3 minutes. Marvin's tone, his use of echo and tremolo, was the sound of post-war optimism, new, modern, electric. When I picked up my first cheap guitar, it wasn't to sing. It was to try to speak like Hank. He proved a pop guitarist didn't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful thing is the note that lingers, waiting for the next breath. It was 1984. I was in the crowd, drenched in purple light, when the first chord of Purple Rain rang out. And there, next to Prince, young, confident, and utterly in sync, was Wendy Melvoin. She wasn't in his shadow. She was the mirror. Her playing wasn't just rhythm. It was color. On Purple Rain, she built the storm around his solo. On Kiss, she turned funk into liquid silk. On Mountains, she gave pop a psychedelic shimmer. Wendy didn't just back Prince, she matched him. Intensity for intensity, sensitivity for sensitivity. Watching her play was like watching someone feel the song into existence. Every chord breathed, every muted strum had attitude. She made the guitar feminine, spiritual, and fierce all at once, something rare in pop at the time. Decades later, when I hear those Revolution-era tracks, I don't just hear Prince, I hear the partnership. Wendy's textures turned the Minneapolis sound into something bigger than funk or rock. She made it emotional architecture, the kind you can live inside forever. If you grew up in the 1960s, you probably heard Tommy Tedesco's guitar hundreds of times and never knew it. He was everywhere, hiding behind pop's biggest smiles. The Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, the Monkees. If it was coming out of an AM radio between 1962 and 1970, odds are Tommy was in the mix. I met him once on a session in LA. Just another day, another chart. He had that quiet humor, that speed, that taste. He'd take one look at the sheet, count off, and somehow make every part feel like it had been in the song forever. That's what the Wrecking Crew did. They made magic feel effortless. Tommy was the definition of versatility. One moment surf pop, next a movie score, then a TV theme. His sound was California sunlight bottled for radio. You might not know his face, but he's in the DNA of American pop. The reason those songs still sound fresh today is that he played like a craftsman, precise, melodic, always in service of the song. Tommy Tedesco wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing feel. And somehow, by staying invisible, he left fingerprints on an entire generation's soundtrack. I was at American Sound Studio in Memphis when Reggie Young plugged in. No ego, no fireworks, just a man and his Telecaster. When Elvis stepped up to the mic for Suspicious Minds, it wasn't the big voice that caught me first. It was Reggie's tone. Warm, golden, southern sunlight in sound. Reggie had this gift. He could make the guitar breathe. Listen to Dusty Springfield's Son of a Preacher Man or Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline. That's Reggie, lyrical, patient, full of space. He made pop feel grown up, less about teenage rebellion, more about reflection, memory, romance. He'd play one note and let it hang. Perfectly phrased, perfectly placed. Never too much, never too little. You can't fake that kind of musical empathy. Reggie played like he was listening to the singer as he played. When I close my eyes and hear that rising riff before Elvis sings "We're Caught in a Trap," I realize this is pop built on soul. Reggie Young's guitar didn't fight for attention. It quietly demanded it. That's why his sound still feels timeless.
Sad enough, I thought that I heard you laughing.
When Losing My Religion came out, I was working in a small-town record store. Every morning I'd flip on MTV, and there it was again, that jangling, mandolin-like riff that felt both ancient and brand new. Peter Buck wasn't a rock star in the classic sense. He was an architect of feeling.
Oh no, I've said too much.
He played like a poet writes, simply, precisely, with rhythm that carried emotion without shouting it. His Rickenbacker wasn't loud or distorted. It glowed, and it pulled alternative music straight into the heart of mainstream pop.
Lost and blind before. Oh no, I've said.
The song didn't even have a traditional chorus, but it didn't need one. That circular riff was the hook. It told the story all by itself. Heartbreak, doubt, faith, all in those shimmering strings.
Trying to keep up with you.
I remember watching kids come in asking for the song with the mandolin. They didn't even know it was a guitar. That's how much Peter Buck changed things. He made texture the star. He showed that you could be emotional, intellectual, and pop at the same time. That a guitar could be both heartbeat and confession.
Trying to keep an eye on you.
Years later, when I pick up a 12-string and hit that first open chord, I still feel it. That mix of light and melancholy that only Buck could pull off. He didn't just change pop, he gave it depth.
With you, and I don't know if I can do it.
The journey doesn't end here, pop lovers. Watch this next.